It's Thursday, January 30th, and welcome to the New York Amsterdam News Podcast. I'm Cyril Josh Barker, coming to you from the offices of the New York Amsterdam News in Harlem. On this week's podcast, my special guest is higher education specialist Dr. R. Wayne Woodson, who is the great-grandnephew of Black History Month founder Carter G. Woodson. He's going to discuss the importance of Black History Month and his work with historically Black colleges and universities. My guest this week is higher education specialist Dr. R. Wayne Woodson, who is the great-grandnephew of Black History Month founder Carter G. Woodson. He's with me to discuss his work and the legacy of his great-uncle. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Woodson. How are you?
I am doing really well. Thank you for asking.
All right. Well, first, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Obviously, with Black History Month coming up, I know that you have some things that you want to say, and we're also going to be discussing your work with fundraising for HBCUs. Well, first and foremost, tell us a little bit about who you are. I know that you are the great-grandnephew of Carter G. Woodson, who started Black History Month, but just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, yes, so I am the great-grandnephew of Carter G. Woodson. Interestingly, so my great-grandfather was his father's brother. And so my great-grandfather named his son after Carter G. Woodson's father. He named him Robert Wayne, and I then am now named Robert Wayne. And so I am the second, so I was named after Carter G. Woodson's dad as well. So my life is higher ed and work with HBCUs and making educational access and affordability my life's work. And so that's what I do. I guess I've kind of followed after, what Carter G. Woodson started with, making history and education central to what I do on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. And just tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up, knowing who, the family that you're in and the legacy that your great uncle, left behind, celebrating Black History Month. Tell us a little bit about that. What were you told as, growing up as a child, in your teen years about him?
So it's interesting. When I was younger, we went to a lot of events around the country and openings and statues and libraries. And at the time when I was younger, I didn't really understand fully what was going on. I just knew that I had to dress up a lot and go to a lot of events. And as I got older, I started to understand what was going on and the importance of that. So it was challenging because I did not have the typical childhood, because a lot of the times we were traveling, or a lot of the times I was at banquets or dinners and openings. And so sometimes, and interestingly, a lot of this will be in the book I'm working on, I resented sometimes when I was younger being a Woodson, because I wanted to have a normal childhood. And that was not the case. It was really not until I got to Morehouse as an undergrad that I fully started to appreciate what Carter G. Woodson had done for my people and what he really meant to my family. And so that's first 15 years of my life, really, I was just like, when will this be over?
So I'm going to get to, I know you went to Morehouse, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but what I do want to get is just kind of a statement from you about Black History Month. I mean, we're, beginning to celebrate it. The theme this year is going to be African Americans and the vote. What does Black history mean to you? I mean, you've lived it, you're from the family. What does it mean to you? And why is it so important that we have it?
Well, what I always try to get people to do, especially now, is understand that the original intent when it was developed as Black History Week was really to celebrate all we had learned the other 11 months. And then when it became a month, was still to celebrate what we had learned the other 11 months. Somehow over time, we have switched that process to, we will spend that 1 month studying the history. And so what I try to do personally, and anytime I speak or discuss Black history, is discuss that we really should be celebrating and studying all year long. And so what it means for me is really looking at those people who are not the normal Black history legends or people that are considered important. That there are a lot of lesser known people that have done amazing things, and that I try to impart that especially to young people who are not fully aware of all that African Americans have done for this country.
Amazing. So I do want to talk a little bit about you're in higher education. You work, a lot with it. I know that you yourself went to an HBCU like myself. I actually I graduated rather, from Alabama State University. I know that you graduated from Morehouse. Did you always know that you were going to go to an HBCU? Was that your top choice? Was Morehouse your top choice?
Well, so when I was about 8, we were on one of those trips actually to Atlanta, and my parents took me to Morehouse to visit, and I said I wanted to go there just because I liked it. But in high school, my godmother was our choir director, Nina Scott, and she was pretty much set that all of her students would go to HBCUs. So I knew that I was going to go to an HBCU, but interestingly, I had applied to Kentucky State University, where most of her students went, had been accepted, had paid to go, and it was my senior year of high school, and I heard the Morehouse College Glee Club in concert, and decided that I was going to Morehouse again. And so I made that switch, and it was probably one of the best decisions I have made, just educationally and professionally, because it has opened up doors that probably I would not have had. I've sung in Poland and Russia and Bermuda. I was in the Olympics. So, it just was probably a great decision. And at that time, the magazine, the journal that Carter G. Woodson had started, was being edited at Morehouse.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so, exactly. And so going there, I guess, was like preordained. So it kind of all brought me full circle to my roots and to my family.
And it's interesting. I actually am a part of ASALA. I'm a member of ASALA. I've been a member actually for the last few years. And I get that journal every month at my house. And let me tell you, if you're not a member of ASALA, which is the organization that Carter G. Woodson founded that decides the theme for Black History Month, anybody out there, definitely should be a part of it. The journal is just amazing. There's so many great articles in there and essays about things that you might not even know about. And of course, getting something about Black history in the mail all month long is something that I think we all need.
Yes. Yeah. It's an excellent organization. When they started the branch here in Atlanta, of course, I was invited and became a member of that branch. And so I think it's an organization that is not as well known as it should be, but certainly doing amazing work.
Absolutely. Yeah, we actually do quite a few events here in New York City. Usually on the kickoff of Black History Month, we have a statewide event at one of the churches in the Bronx, and a lot of people come out, and it's a phenomenal event. But you actually majored in vocal studies, is that correct? You're a singer, is that right?
I did. So my bachelor's and 2 of my graduate degrees are actually in music. So I was an opera singer for a while.
Oh, okay.
And a conductor. So I have degrees in choral conducting and orchestral conducting.
Okay.
And so I did that for over a decade.
Oh, wow. Okay, yep. Interesting. And you made the switch going from, music to working in higher education. Take us through that experience. Why the switch? Why did you decide to do that?
Well, I swore when I was younger that I would never be an educator. My mother was an educator. She's a retired 37-year Detroit public school teacher and administrator. And I just saw how exhausted she was all the time. And so I swore that the one career I would never do was education. So I avoided it tooth and nail. I worked when I was at Georgia State, and I kind of enjoyed it, but, it wasn't really what I was going to do. I took a part-time faculty position at Payne College, and then took on some administrative duties by default in my department, and realized that I absolutely loved administration.
Wow.
Like, it is probably one of the most enjoyable experiences I've had professionally in my lifetime.
Mm.
And so I became the head of the Division of Student Affairs and Enrollment Management at Payne.
Okay.
And at that time, I joined a lot of national organizations and served on quite a few boards around the country. And I was like, it's so funny that the one thing I swore that I would never do is actually the career that has probably given me the most satisfaction.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And Payne College, actually one of my favorite HBCUs in Augusta, Georgia, is actually one of our smaller HBCUs, and that's why I like it, because I always tell people there's 105 or 4 HBCUs in America, and every one of them has touched this country and touched people's lives in so many ways. So I find it amazing that you did work at Augusta college down there. Payne College in Augusta, Georgia. You actually specialized in student affairs and enrollment management. Tell us a little bit about I get the student affairs thing, but you specialize in enrollment management. Tell us a little bit about what that's about.
So enrollment management is really a new area that has kind of been developed over the last few years. So it encompasses everything from registration to admissions, all of those areas, financial aid. And so it's a big push, especially with HBCUs, because most of them, especially the smaller ones, mm-hmm. are primarily funded and driven by tuition.
Okay. And again, the reason I asked, because I had actually never heard of that. I mean, I assumed I knew what it was, enrollment management, but just knowing that there's a system in place to make sure that our students are attending HBCUs, that they're going, that they're staying, that they're able to pay for it is something that we definitely need. You actually also have your organization is Woodson and Associates. Is that a nonprofit, or tell us a little bit about that? What is that?
So Woodson and Associates is a for-profit consulting company, okay. And we work in 3 areas. So there's one division that deals with HBCUs, mm-hmm. and we work with them in a number of different areas. And then we have the nonprofit arm, which is called the Woodson Fund, which works with students, current students, and potential students to provide scholarships and services to them once they get in to make sure that they can get to graduation. Mm-hmm. And because, we know that getting them in is not necessarily the challenge, although we know that they come with some deficiencies. Mm-hmm. The issue is once they get in, getting them to the graduation point.
Right.
And so there are 2 divisions to our company. But Woodson and Associates is the for-profit division, and then the Woodson Fund is the non-for-profit side of the company.
I see. And just with your experience, I ask this to a lot of people that work with HBCUs specifically. Why the black colleges? Because a lot of people, they'll ask me, because I'm just like you. I went to a public HBCU though, and I always feel that we need to make sure that those are staying alive, because over the last few years, you've seen that there have been a few of our private HBCUs that have closed, and you working at a smaller mm-hmm. HBCU and working in even Morehouse, which it's not a big school, but it's still one of our private HBCUs. Why is it so important to maintain those? Because we have 105 schools, but we have our public ones. But I know for me, I have a special place in my heart for the private ones. And again, if you could elaborate a little more on just what it takes to get the donations, to get those schools going, to keep them going, to maintain those. What does that look like?
Well, I think the reason that I have dedicated my career to serving them is because we spend a lot of time discussing relevancy. And I'm at this point now where I don't think the relevancy discussion should be had, because they are educating the smallest percentage of the higher ed community, but graduating the highest numbers across the board.
Okay.
And so although the smallest number of African Americans might be in attendance at those schools, they're still producing more than 60% of most professionals in the workplace. Mm-hmm. And so I think that that's critical, because they're doing more than just educating. For instance, my primary area of research focus is African American males. Right. While they come to the college the first year, not just with academic deficiencies, but with years of conditioning that makes them think sometimes that they are not capable of producing. And so HBCUs spend a whole lot of time holistically educating the next generation. And that type of holistic education can really only be provided by the community itself.
Right.
And I think that's why HBCUs are critical because, for instance, my senior year of undergrad, my father passed away that October.
Okay.
The faculty and staff at Morehouse are really the reason that I finished because they really had to nurture me through those last few months in a way that I'm not sure, a predominantly white institution, although academically might not have been able to nurture me through that grieving process to get me through, which would only have been 7 more months before my degree completion.
Right.
And so I think that's why they're so important. Now, funding is critical. We are not known for giving back to our institutions.
Yeah.
But what people should realize is I can get one gift of $1 million or I can get 1 million people to give $1.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes I think people think that their small gift is not relevant. And so they don't give. But if you have $20, some people I know give $5 a month. Those types of smaller gifts, especially for smaller institutions, can be critical over the long run. And so every donation is important across the board, be it a large school like FAMU or Jackson State or a small school like Payne. Those small gifts make an impact as well.
And that's so true because I know that, those small gifts, like you said, if 1 million people give $1 or if 300 people give $5, that can certainly turn into something really big for any school of any size. I wanted to talk to you about, you have an event coming up pretty soon. You're doing an event at the end of the month. Actually, you're based in Atlanta. Is that correct? That's where you are.
Yes.
You're based in Atlanta.
We are in Atlanta, yep.
Okay. And you have an event coming up where you're going to be fundraising. You're going to be raising money for scholarships for HBCU students. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So we are having on February 28th here in Atlanta our African Royalty Scholarship Fundraising Gala. Our goal this year is $50,000 in scholarships net from that event. People can purchase tickets on our website. And we are trying to provide scholarships, which we will look at this year, gap scholarships. And so that's what this gala's fundraising is going to be for, because sometimes students will have enough aid or whatever, but they might have a $2,000 gap, which would not allow them to enroll for that semester. So this year's fundraiser is going to be specifically for gap funding. There are opportunities for people to be sponsors because, people from other cities have said they couldn't come to the gala, but they'd be interested in being a sponsor or making a donation. So we have some people doing that. Because it's an African theme this year, we're actually going to have a marketplace. So we have people who are vendors of things that are, signing up to be vendors for the event. We really want it to be a big event because there is such a need at every HBCU for scholarship funds.
Absolutely.
That is one of the number one needs at every school because most of their funding has to go to keeping the institution running. And so one of our primary mission statements is to remove the barriers to education. And so we are trying to do our part by raising a significant number of scholarship funds, which will be used at HBCUs around the country.
And is this the first event that you've had, or have you had other ones in the past?
So this is the first gala we're having. We've done workshops and other meetings and smaller events, but this will be our first gala. And so we're working with a lot of people to try to make this a big event. And so we're hoping that it will have a huge turnout and that people, will contribute. Every dollar that's coming from this event is going to the scholarship funds. We're not using any of this funding from this event for any of our institutional expenses.
Interesting.
And so a lot of people have been asking that question, but everything that's raised from this event will go directly to the scholarship fund.
And we're here in New York, but I'm sure you had mentioned that people out of state can sponsor and donate. What's the best way that folks can get in touch with you to donate if they want to be a part, if they want to, give money to help out?
So the easiest way is on our website, which is Woodson Associates, so WOODSONASSOC.com. Everything is there. There's a tab at the top for the African Royalty Gala. All the forms are there. There's actually a link where they can go right to the link and donate there. We will send documentation back to them for their gifts. And if they want to reach me specifically, my personal website is rwaynewoodson.com.
Okay.
Because there are people who wanted me to come speak or want to reach me directly, so that's my personal website. People always ask if I respond to my messages myself. Yes, I do respond to all my messages myself. And so if people want to reach me directly or if they have questions or anything, I'm always eager and willing to speak to people.
Wonderful. And lastly, I do want to ask you a question because we're in Black History Month. We're going to be in Black History Month for February. I did want to ask you, the national theme this year, which is something that we're covering here in the Amsterdam News, is about the history of Black suffrage. The theme, for those who don't know, I mentioned it earlier, is African Americans and the vote. And the reason why that is because I think it's the 150th anniversary of the 15th Amendment being ratified, allowing black men to be able to vote. And of course, the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which in 1920, which gave the right for women to vote. So I just want, being the great grandnephew of Carter G. Woodson, you've been dealing and working with Black history pretty much your entire life. What are your thoughts on the Black vote? I know this is such a crucial year for African Americans in terms of voting. We're getting into another presidential election. Can you tell us your thoughts on the theme for Black History Month 2020?
Well, I think it's an excellent theme. I am probably one of the biggest advocates on registering and voting. Just a couple of key points. Although people are always enamored with the national and the federal voting, always, get involved in the local level because that will impact you so critically on a daily basis that sometimes people do not get involved in those quote-unquote smaller elections because they don't see them as this huge event. But I think that we just need to, as a people, just as a unified American people, need to be more active in the voting process. I talk to young people all the time. A lot of them say they don't vote because they just don't feel that it does anything, it's not impactful, and that their votes don't matter. And I think that we just as a community need to really start figuring out some ways to help our younger generation realize that they do matter. And so that we don't have a continuation of some paradigms that are shifting us backwards and not moving us forward. So I think this theme is an excellent theme, and I hope that, ASALH and other organizations will not just get people registered to vote, but really educate people on what has been lost, how many lives have been lost, to get us to even be able to vote. I think sometimes we're losing the impact because the further we get away from things like the civil rights movement or, what happened on the Pettus Bridge or, what King did or even what Carter G. Woodson did, the further we get away from those people and those experiences, we lose some of that impact. And I think that I would hope that this month we start reminding people of all that has been sacrificed for us to have the ability to now walk into a booth and make some decisions. Because by not making the decision, you're actually making one. And so I think that this is a critical year for all of us. For instance, we almost lost all federal funding for HBCUs a few weeks ago.
Yes.
And if we don't get involved in this process, things can shift literally overnight.
Well, very well said. Well, listen, thank you so much for being on the podcast. We really appreciate it. We definitely would love to have you back, and I certainly wish you good luck during your event that's going to be happening later this month. And thank you again for being on the podcast.
No problem at all. Thank you for having me.
That concludes this week's podcast. You can pick up the latest edition of the New York Amsterdam News on newsstands and get updates online at amsterdamnews.com. You can also keep up with us on Facebook at NY Amsterdam News and follow us on Twitter at NYAmNews. I'm Cyril Josh Barker. Thanks for listening.